I know that studying geography was the most exciting class you had when you were in school. But I think it's important that we study some geography of the Bible, because a lot of things in the Bible refer to various places and travels, and I know it helps to know some geography, so we're going to spend a couple, 3 weeks looking at the geography of the Bible lands. And last week we were talking about what it looks like today. You've got to see what it looks like today to understand what it looked like back then and where everything came from. They're fine. As long as these are off, I think it's good. As you know, the Middle East is a mess. 2,000 years before Christ, Abraham and Sarah made a fateful choice. God had promised that Abraham was going to have a son. But he did not tell Sarah that she was going to be the mother. And so Sarah... Is he messing with that again? So Sarah, now they came from Mesopotamia. And under Mesopotamian law, if the primary wife could not have a child, it was her responsibility to provide a secondary wife for her husband. Now, Sharon and I couldn't have children for many years, and not one time did she ever suggest, not once did she ever suggest that. At any rate, Sarah and Abraham had picked up a slave girl in Egypt, a young girl. And Sarah gets the bright idea, okay, since I'm too old to have children, Abraham can sleep with my slave girl and have a child with her. And Abraham agreed to that. They didn't check with God on this. They just decided to do it. Now remember, that was their culture. Sarah thought this was the way to handle things. They even dug up a huge library in this area of the world, in the last couple of centuries, and they found a bunch of clay tablets. And on several of the clay tablets were documents about doing this. It even told you the best place to get a secondary wife for your husband. Lululand. We have no idea where Lululand is. I guess that's why they call girls, she's a real Lulu. I don't know. At any rate, they had a child named Ishmael. And God put a curse on the whole human race because of that poor choice. God had told Abraham, I'm going to take care of this, trust me. But Abraham listened to his wife, and she listened to her culture, and they had a child that was not meant to be. And God said, because of this, this child is going to be a pain in the neck to the rest of the... When Abraham has the child I'm promising, there's going to be warfare. And ever since, there has been warfare in the Middle East because of this. Ishmael's descendants are the Arab peoples. And ever since 2000 BC, there has been warfare between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. And today, it's still going strong. There's warfare right now in the Middle East. In Israel, there's warfare in Gaza because of what Abraham and Sarah did. Now, as we said last week, this is what the map looks like today. We have Iran here, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and over here, around the coast, is this little land called Israel. And so everything that happens in the Bible happens in this region. Now, as I said last time, we believe that the Garden of Eden is somewhere in this area at the head of the Persian Gulf. The Bible gives us a few clues. It tells us some of the rivers that bounded the Garden of Eden, and that would be in this region here. Now, most of you heard in school about the Fertile Crescent. You remember that? Okay. The Fertile Crescent starts here, it goes up this way, and then back down, because you don't travel straight across here because it's desert. And so if you've got animals and you've got family and you need water, so you follow the river line up this way. Now, Baghdad, Nineveh, Babylon, these are all up in this region here. So this is where the major world empires were at the time of the Bible. All right, so that's the situation in those days, or today, the way the world looks today. Now, last week we were looking at the map of Israel. Here's what it looks like today. After World War II, in the 40s, at the end of the war, the Jews had been scattered all over the world. There were millions of Jews in Russia and Poland and Germany, and millions of them had been slaughtered in the German Holocaust. Thank you. 6 million Jews were murdered by the Germans in the death camps. And so the world kind of felt sorry for the Jews, and the United Nations decided to allow all the Jews that wanted to go home and reoccupy Israel. Now, Israel was occupied, but there was no nation there. That's what a lot of people today don't understand. They talk about the poor Palestinians and the Palestinian nation. There was no Palestinian nation. There never has been up until recently. After the Jews left, now, read that passage in Galatians.
There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
All right. Paul says there is neither Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female. What does he mean by that?
It doesn't matter.
He says there's one religion now. There's just one religion. Christianity came into effect in about AD 30 in Pentecost, Acts chapter 2. And God says this is it. There are no more other religions. There is one religion for everybody in the universe. Today, there is one religion. Anybody that says, oh no, you can get to God any way you want to, what does Jesus say about that?
I'm the way, the truth.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You can't get to God if you're not a Christian. It's that simple. Christianity is the only authorized religion by God Himself. So Paul recognizes that in Galatians. He says, now God has done away with all Judaism. He's done away with everything except Christianity. Christianity is the only religion God accepts. So in AD 70, after the church had had time to spread the gospel throughout the known world, by AD 70, the church had been spread throughout Asia Minor, throughout Italy, throughout parts of Europe, and it was on the way to going throughout the world. God says, now is the time I'm going to bring it into Judaism. He had to finish off Judaism totally. Why?
He wanted to bring about Christianity.
He wanted to bring about Christianity. He did not want to have any other options. He says, I'm going to do away with Judaism. Christianity is the only religion acceptable, and that I'm going to do away with Judaism. So he had the Romans come in and conquer Israel. They destroyed Jerusalem. They burned the temple and destroyed all the records. Now, the temple had been destroyed back in 586 BC, but the records had been kept intact. Most of them.
So he was talking about the Judaism religion.
Yes. Not the nationality, but the religion.
The nationality is the same.
Oh yeah, the Jews are still Jews as far as their bloodline. Right. But as far as Jewish religion, God did away with Judaism in one fell swoop. Since there are no records, you cannot reconstitute the Jewish faith. Why?
You can't prove you were descendant of.
You can't have worship. The Jews cannot have worship the way God gave it to them in the first covenant. Why?
There's nothing available.
There is no such thing as a priest in Judaism. They cannot prove their lineage. If you can't prove your lineage, you cannot be a priest. God made that absolutely clear. You cannot be a priest in Judaism if you can't produce your records. Matter of fact, when some of the Jews came back from Babylonian captivity, some of the priests couldn't prove it. And God said, I'm sorry, you can't be a priest. It's that simple. You have to prove your records. You have to prove you're descended from Levi. Yes?
It seems to me in that same logic, you'd have a hard time proving if you're a Jew.
That's true. That's
What
exactly.
tribe?
Yeah, it would be hard for a Jew today to
You
prove
can't
he's a
go
Jew
by your last
because
name.
the records are gone. Yeah, you're right.
So it does go with it, I mean, because if the records wouldn't have been done away with, then you would have a problem.
Exactly.
People saying that.
That's
the
exactly.
records show and there's still.
And that's why God did it. I mean, God took care of all. It's amazing how God works all these things out. And God used the Romans to accomplish this particular event. So in AD 70, when the Jews, when Jerusalem was destroyed and the records were wiped out, you see, even if the Jews today rebuilt the temple, of course they'd start war with every Arab in the world because they'd have to tear down the Dome of the Rock, which is where the Muslims' most holy spot is. But even if they rebuilt the temple tomorrow, they could not restart Judaism. There are no priests. There is no such thing as a Jewish priest. They have rabbis.
I was going to say, is that what
They call them rabbis. They don't call them priests because there are nobody can prove, not one soul alive can prove that he is qualified to be a priest in Judaism. So he can't be a priest. It's that simple.
do
They
they
can't.
recognize that?
Not as such. They got ways to work around it. But they can't restart worship. They can't restart the sacrificial system. They cannot do it. It's just not possible. God took care of that. Now, at the same time, when the temple was destroyed and the records were annihilated, the Romans came in and they destroyed most of the cities of Jerusalem. They scattered the Jews all over the world. Jews went to Russia, they went to Europe, they went to Africa, they went to Egypt, they went to everywhere. And Jews lived everywhere in the world. And so for the next 2,000 years, the Jews prospered in all the other countries of the world. There were thousands and millions of Jews in America. There were Jews in Russia. There were Jews in Poland. There were Jews in Germany. I mean, Jews everywhere. Then in World War II, when the Germans decided to eradicate the Jews, in some ways Hitler was a genius. He was a nut genius, but he was a genius. He realized that if he was going to seize power, he needed somebody to blame. So who's the easiest people to blame? The Jews. So Hitler blamed the Jews for all the failures in Germany, particularly losing World War I. He got up and started teaching that, well, we lost World War I because of the Jews. And so he turned the entire German nation against the Jews, and he started this program of annihilating the Jews. And that was a pure politics. He didn't care about the religious aspect at all. He was just doing that as a political maneuver. And so at the end of the war, in the World War II, all these Jews have been scattered, many have been murdered, and so the United Nations feels sorry for them, and they said, okay, we're going to allow you to return back to Israel. Now, during the 2,000 years that the Jews had been scattered from Israel, they had gone everywhere, several Muslim or several Arab tribes had moved into the country. They never formed a nation, and that's what a lot of Americans don't understand. There has not ever been a Palestinian nation until recently. There was no nation of Palestinians. Of course, when you hear the news, they say, oh, well, those Jews went in and took away the country of the... No, it was not theirs. It was never theirs. They had just lived there. Of course, I guess that's the way most countries are settled. People just kind of move in and move everybody else out.
Happened to America.
And that's what happened to us, yeah. We Europeans moved in and moved all the Native Americans out, and you can argue about, well, whose land is it really? Well, who did they take it away from? The Indians took it away from other Indians, and there's not a square foot of land on the entire planet that somebody hadn't taken away from somebody. So it's kind of ridiculous to go back and say, well, who really owns it? Well, the guy sitting there right now owns it. At any rate, when the United Nations told the Jews, you can go back to Israel, and that's going to be your land. Great Britain had been given a protectorate over Palestine, over this area. Now, this area has been variously known as Israel, Palestine, the Promised Land, the Holy Land. It's called by various things, but it's all the same thing. Yes?
This was 47, right?
Okay, in 1947, the Jews started returning home. In 48, they declared the nation of Israel. At that point, the first Arab-Israeli war started. The Arabs in the land banded together and attacked the Israelites, or the Israel, and there's a big war. Israel won, and Israel took over large parts of the country. And then in 54, there was a second Arab-Israeli war, and the nations around, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, began to attack Israel as well. Israel's army went in and knocked everybody else off, and they expanded the country to its largest extent.
Was that only because of the help from the nations that helped them?
A lot, yes.
They won?
Russia and some of the communist
So
nations.
this has to do with why the whole region
Yes.
hates America.
Yes. We are called the Great Satan.
Right.
Israel's called the Lesser Satan. We are called the Great Satan because we helped Israel defeat the Arabs. We supplied them with arms and weapons, and Russia supplied the other side, and it's been a big mess.
Is Iran funding this too?
Sir?
Isn't Iran been?
Iran, oh yeah, Iran's big. Yeah, Iran and Iraq and those big nations, and even Saudi Arabia have been funding the Arab side of this thing. And then in 67, there was another major war. In 73, there was another major war. And Syria and Egypt both invaded Israel with Arab help, and there was another big war fought, and every time Israel wins. And so they push the boundaries a little further. And so the Arabs keep backing up. Finally, after the 73 war, Americans and the United Nations began to tell Israel, okay, you're going to have to make some agreements with these Palestinians. Now, what I was talking about last week when we quit, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they won't help the Palestinians. They could take them all in and never notice it. There's not that many. Why won't they? Why won't they help these poor Palestinians that they feel so sorry for? Well,
They don't want that.
they don't want them to settle everything. They want to keep the strife going. They want to destroy Israel. And they know the best way they can do it is to keep all these camps of Palestinians poor and miserable. That's their best source of terrorism. I mean, you go into these camps that are around the country full of Palestinian boys, when they get to be 17, what do they got to do? Nothing. So they join the terrorist organizations. That's where Hamas and ISIS and Hezbollah and all these other terrorist organizations came from. And so Israel has been fighting to hold on by the skin of their teeth. Well, in the late 1900s, Israel agreed with American pressure to give the Arabs certain power in this area. And so they gave the West Bank to the control of the Palestinians. Now the Palestinians finally started their own government. It's called PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, under Yasser Arafat. And so they gave the West Bank or they let them have control over it. They still run it, but they allow the Palestinians to kind of rule as long as they don't cause trouble. Of course, that doesn't last long.
I would have to think that, those other countries and look at the region and look at all that during, the last 50 years, 60 years, during all these times, oil had to have something to do with it.
Oh, well, yeah.
Many other countries.
Oh, yeah.
Political
Oh,
side.
yeah. That's why Russia's involved.
Decision making, it wasn't really
Oh, no,
so
no.
much.
No. That's the only reason Russia's there. They're thinking, well, if we support the Arabs and they win, we get a lot of oil. And our guys over here in America, our politicians are trying to think, we got to play both sides against the middle. We got to pretend we feel sorry for the Arabs, but we got to also be on the side of Israel. That's our best ally in the Middle East. We depend on Israel for its ports, for its strategic position. So it's a big political, economic mess. So that's what's going on today. Now over here, on this side, is where the fighting's going on right now. This is the Gaza. And Gaza City is right here. And that's where Hamas attacked Israel several weeks ago. October, they sent a terrorist group, over 1,000 terrorist fighters into Israel. They murdered men, women, and children. They cut babies' heads off. And then Israel naturally responded.
Well, why would they do that?
I don't know, just mean, I guess. So Israel says, we've had enough of this foolishness. We're going to go into Gaza and we're going to wipe out Hamas. And Hamas had gone into schools and they had gone into hospitals and they had built headquarters and bunkers and missile launching sites. So Israel had to go in and they attacked.
But they didn't do it until they moved they tried to move all the civilians to the south part.
Israel tried to warn the civilians to get out, but Hamas wouldn't let them go.
Right, they don't want them.
They wanted them to be killed so that American newspapers would say, look how mistreated these poor people are. Well, they are mistreated, but it's their own fault. They're putting up with Hamas. So it's... And when American politicians think, well, we're going to go in here and we're going to get everybody to sit down and be nice to each other and we're going to have a two-state solution and everybody's going to be happy, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. They hate each other so bad. The Arabs have already taken an oath. We're not going to stop until every Israeli in this country is dead. I mean, they're not going to live with them.
In 2005, Israel gave full control of Gaza to
Yes.
the Palestinians.
Yes.
And so that they would establish a government.
Yes.
And they haven't done anything
No.
with that. All they've done is make weapons, shoot rockets
Yeah.
back at
Yeah.
them.
And then to add fuel to the fire, Iran, North Korea, and some of these rebel states are shipping weapons to these terrorist organizations. Every once in a while, we capture a ship from Iran going toward Israel full of missiles and bombs, and and then Iran is all offended, you know. So it's a big mess going on. All right, back to our. So here's what the Arabs would call the state of Palestine. Like I said, there's really no such thing. Here's the West Bank. Here's where, when I went to Israel and traveled around, we had to be careful going into certain parts of the West Bank because the Arabs were not real friendly to American tourists. So there were certain parts of it they did not want us to go. I couldn't go to Nablus. We did get to go to Jericho and to Bethlehem and Hebron and so forth. So it's still a mess. It's still problems. The Arabs occasionally will strap bombs to themselves and climb on a bus and blow up a busload of Israelis. And so until both sides, yes ma'am.
Well, you don't hear much about Jordan being
No.
involved. But it's interesting how much of Jordan borders the
Yes.
West Bank.
Yes.
And has Jordan always been not neutral?
No, Jordan's always been on the Arab side, but they've had to be real careful because they know Israel could walk in and wipe them out in a heartbeat. So they're trying to walk a fine line, not to push Israel too far. Israel just slaughtered.
Israel is so powerful because of the money we send them.
Largely because of American support. Every year Israel buys billions of dollars worth of planes and bombs and rockets, and then at the end of the year, our Congress always forgives the debt, every single year. So they never have to pay for it. So we are supporting Israel fully militarily. So that's a big mess too, because naturally the Arabs are saying, well, if it wasn't for the big Satan, we could win this thing. And they're probably right.
If we just drop support in the other countries and just let them just take that area, we would have no that whole area would turn worse.
Yes.
Would-
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The
They come
bigger
for
devil
us
would
then.
take care of
Yeah, it would be a mess for us, yes.
First of all, how did they come up with the idea of where the West Bank was going to be? Is there a mountain range there or something, or?
There are certain geographical features, I'm not real sure how they arrived at
The
that.
mountains went all the way,
Yeah, there's this mountainous area, I don't really know all the,
and where did all the people come from just going into the West Bank? Because Jordan, were they Jordanians before? Were they?
well, there were tribes of Arabs living in Israel prior to the 40s when the Jews came in. So, and then a lot of others have come in, yeah. But they're Arab tribes that have come in, and they're fighting against Israel. Now, one thing I want you to understand, none of this going on today has anything to do with biblical prophecy. It's not biblical, it's not scriptural. God is not on the side of Israel. This is all political. It's all nowadays. It's got nothing to do. And unfortunately, a lot of American politicians in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and today still believe that God's got special plans for the Jews. No, God did away with Judaism. There is no Judaism in God's eyes. It's all Christianity. So if Israel falls tomorrow, too bad. But it's got nothing to do with biblical scripture, okay?
Aren't some people waiting for the temple
Oh, yeah.
to be
Oh,
rebuilt?
yeah.
And haven't there been reports that
Yes.
there are certain groups
Oh, yeah.
gathering money
Yes,
to
ma'am.
rebuild the
Yes,
temple?
ma'am. There certainly are.
But the Dome of the Rock is the spot.
It's the second most holy spot in the world to an Arab, to a Muslim. The Dome of the Rock.
Christians
Mecca is number one.
That's what.
believe, do they believe anything about that spot where?
Well, Christians would say that's where the temple needs to be rebuilt so Israel can have a
That-
resurgence.
That was my.
But that's not going to happen. God is not, that has nothing to do with God's plan at all. God's plan is already underway.
It wouldn't matter anyways, because it's just a building, you still
Yes.
need the record.
Yes, yeah, you still couldn't. Even if they rebuilt the temple tomorrow, they could not restart Judaism. There are no priests.
No one could go into the Holy
There's
of
not
Holies
one-
to do
that's right.
anything.
There are no priests. You cannot restart Judaistic religion without priests. They don't have any. That's that simple. So whatever's going on now has nothing to do with the Bible. It's all political.
Well, and beyond that, the Jews rejected Christ.
Yes,
So,
yes.
why would God still
Good point.
be on their side,
That's a
so to
great point.
speak, if they rejected
That's
His
a great
Son
point.
anyways?
They rejected God's
But
plan.
the Jewish people don't believe that
No,
rejection
no.
was, so really, that part doesn't matter to them.
Matter of fact, 90% of all the Jews living in Israel are atheists. They don't even believe in God anymore. They've already given up. The Messiah is not coming.
Not the Messiah.
The Messiah is not coming back. They missed it. He wasn't what they were looking for. They were looking for a king who's going to rule the world. And
So what,
some of them are still looking, but most of them have given up.
Yeah, that they think he's gonna come back
Yeah.
and they're gonna
Yeah,
set up
and
his
yeah,
kingdom.
his kingdom's going to be set up in Israel, and he's going to rule the world.
but what we have to look at is just like there's Christians all over the world.
Yes,
God is
Yes.
on the Christian side.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if Timbuktu.
That's exactly right.
America,
you and I have Christian brothers and sisters living in Israel. We have Christian brothers and sisters who are Muslim, who used to be Muslim. So that's just the way it is. Yes.
You know, just by looking at this map, and you saying that most of the Jews are non-believers anyway anymore, it looks like that West Bank is in-your-face cultural to Christianity.
Sure it is.
That's the Holy Land where Jesus did most of
Exactly.
all of his travels,
Exactly.
and that's the West Bank.
That's the West Bank.
It's kind of like in-your-face Christians who just don't care.
Yeah. And what's funny is in all these cities, Bethlehem, Jericho, Jerusalem, you got all these churches built. All these Christian churches from all over the world went in there and built all these churches enshrining This is the spot where Jesus was born. This is the spot where Jesus died. This is the spot where he was crucified. This is, Again, that's just their choice. And they even fuss with each other, which is funny. Some of the preachers in these churches have fought each other because they're stepping on their spot.
I think it was political insurance that the world would protect that land.
Yes.
And they'd move in there and they'd be set up forever.
Yes,
because
yes.
Christianity would never let
That's
that
right.
be destroyed.
That's exactly right.
Political interests in the almighty dollar.
That's right.
That's
The
right.
dollar and political. That's right. Israel would collapse if all the tourists quit going, because they get most of their money from tourism. But the point for us is, it's all politics. It's got nothing to do with the Bible. This is all done away with. God did away with Judaism. It's gone. And so Christianity is all that matters. Israel today is no different from Oklahoma. It's just a place where people live. And we want to convert as many of them as we can. But they're not special in God's eyes anymore. It's just done away with.
Be careful sharing those things out.
But you
I brought this
went,
to keep her from making rude comments to the preacher.
Steve, you went to Israel.
Yes.
You were a tourist.
Yes.
People want to go
Yes.
to the places where Christ
Sure.
was.
I was thrilled I got to go. I mean, I love that I went there. When I talk about the gate that Jesus entered the city in, I've seen it. It hadn't changed that much since the day he went. I walked on ground where Jesus walked. To me, that's so cool. I mean, I walked on streets that Jesus' footprints were on.
So there's something
It's-
about that.
It's interesting, it's cool, it's great, but it's just not that important as far as the biblical story goes.
It's political insurance.
It's political, yeah. But it's all politics. It's not got anything to do with the Bible. So we need to understand that as Americans, it's not about biblical prophecy. It's history. It's not about Bible prophecy and all this stuff.
I think it's political, but I do think it's important we support Israel, because if we don't, and the Arabs come in there and take over,
yeah.
they're going to come after us
Yeah,
next.
yeah,
There's already
yeah.
people here chanting death to America, if you saw it.
We almost have to support Israel. We've got to keep a presence in the Middle East to protect the oil and to keep, there's so many strategic. We can't let the terrorists take over. No, that would be a disaster. So we're in kind of a hard spot too.
Well, if Hezbollah gets involved,
If Hezbollah, yeah.
they're way more powerful
Oh,
than Hamas
yeah.
is.
Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, these are all horribly terrorist organizations.
Don't we have bases in
Yes.
Saudi?
In where? Saudi?
Saudi?
Yeah. We have bases in Saudi Arabia. But they're still Muslim. And they want us to know it. Our women are not allowed to drive cars in Saudi. Our women soldiers are not have to wear certain outfits if they go into the city, as long as they're on the base.
The
they're
men
fine.
do as well. The men you can
Right.
be in shorts.
And you can't wear a cross. So Saudi controls.
Hear the prayer call.
Yeah.
Wes said you heard it all throughout the day.
Oh, yeah.
It's really eerie.
So America is walking a real delicate line, trying to keep everybody happy over there, and nobody's happy.
They don't want to lose money either. I mean,
Yeah,
It's still,
yeah.
it's political because of the almighty dollar. So
Okay,
they gain from it.
moving on. The first important map in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 12. Was there any other comments or questions on that subject? We could talk about it for days. I'm sure you know everything there's to know about it now.
Yeah.
All right. Abraham lived in Ur, the oldest known city on the planet. Ur is now at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, which is in Iraq. Okay? Now, Babylon, here's Babylonia. Babylon is up here. Babylon is right here. Babylon is just up the river from Ur. And then north of there, you have Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrians. Okay? These are the big cities, big powers in the day of the Old Testament. And so God told Abraham, he said, I want you to move. And so Abraham moved up to Haran, up here. And then God had him move later on down into Israel. And so this is Abraham's. Now again, what is this following?
Crescent.
It's following the Fertile Crescents. Yeah, the river. He followed the river because if you go straight across, it gets real dry. You run out of water fast. And plus he held his herds and flocks and animals.
I mean, it's only about that big, though. That part, no. Let's see that part.
It doesn't take that long to go, but back when you're walking, it's a pretty good trick. It's a good trip.
About how many miles are we looking at there?
Okay.
Is there
Do
a-
we know?
I don't think there's a scale chart.
I don't see a scale on there. I'd have to look it up. But
Okay.
it's several hundred miles across here. So it took several weeks for him to, or months, to get all the way.
700 miles.
700 miles? Okay. All right. That's about right. So Abraham came up and came down into Israel. God then took him over into Egypt. That's where he picked up Hagar. And that's where he lied about his wife. Remember, the Pharaoh thought she was so pretty. 75-year-old woman, beautiful. And so, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And so Abraham lied to him. Said, she's not my wife, she's my sister. Well, she was actually his half-sister. In those days, they married closer relatives. So when God told Pharaoh, you touch that woman, you're a dead man, he said, wait. I didn't know it. God said, that's the only reason you're still breathing. And so he bribed Abraham to leave the country. He gave him all kinds of slaves and animals and gold and silver and said, get out! So Abraham moved back up into Israel, and he lived in Canaan. In those days, it was Canaan. So that's what the situation was in the first part of Genesis, when Abraham came on the scene. My stars, time goes fast. I'm sorry, we'll pick up there next time.